Everyone, welcome again to the chat. One thing about is how racing needs to attract more of an audience and how it's marketed. And joining me today is the CEO of Aushorse in Tom Reilly. G'day, Tom. How are you?
Yeah, very well for having me on.
No worries at all. Good to finally get a hold of you. You're usually very busy running around at the sales. It looks like you're a headless chook half the time I see you.
hopefully, there's a bit of organisation behind the kinetic energy. So maybe not completely headless, but yeah, we're always it's an industry that's constantly changing, constantly moving, and it's a very interesting time.
And first of all, what is Aushorse and what's the purpose of the organisation?
Okay, so Aushorse is the marketing arm for the breeding industry. So it was essentially set up by bigger commercial breeders who felt that they needed to pool their resources to be able to drive new investment. So our aim is to drive investment into the Australian bloodstock industry. So that means attracting investment from overseas, from participants overseas, as well as trying to grow domestic ownership too. So that's the charter for the organisation. I also run something called Thoroughbred Breeders Australia, which is the peak body that represents the breeders, and that's probably more around the dealing with issues, dealing with going forward, dealing with the politics, and dealing with politicians, etc.
And you talk about overseas ownership coming into Australia. We see more and more especially Asia. You look at the sales results this year in particular, more and more Asian buyers are interested, even though they can't always be here, because it's good that we've got that overseas ownership coming into our market here, isn't it?
Yeah, look, Australia we're incredibly lucky, really incredibly lucky. When you go around on the world stage, really, of the places where you can come in and invest if you're overseas, there's no restrictions. Then Australia is the go-to place at the moment. Our industry is very dynamic. We've got good prize money, great prize money. It's easy for people to get involved. We've got a good breeding industry that produces good horses, and we've got great trainers. So put together, that's a really competitive package to attract people from overseas.
And the sales market in particular this year has been I was at Gold Coast. I was also at Adelaide and at Easter, and I followed the Gold Coast this week as well. And we've got more sales coming up at the Gold Coast. You wouldn't think COVID existed. The amount of money flying around and the investment has been astronomical. Very strong results across the board.
Yeah, it's you just turn your mind back to where we were, in March last year.
Yeah.
We had the Premier sale, which was sort of largely unaffected by COVID, and it was just coming. And then we had great uncertainty leading up to the Easter sale, and that was a virtual. And there was the sale was significantly down, the clearance rate was down last year at Easter, so really challenging times. And really, so the sales season, for those that don't follow the sort of breeding industry, the sales season starts in January at Magic Millions. So as we got towards that, that time this year, really, Magic Millions, to give you a sort of sense of it, Magic Millions would usually have around 200 internationals. So people coming into Australia with a view to getting out on the sales ground, having a look and buying horses. This year, we're grateful to have them, but we had five people from overseas that were able to come in and look at horses, and they were agents. Great uncertainty. No one quite knew what was going to happen, and in the end, actually, the market was very resilient. And as the years gone on, in the sort of following few months, the market's been far stronger than anyone predicted. And look, that I suppose that mirrors very much other areas. House prices across Australia are soaring. Demand, you can't buy a new car at the moment. So all of these items, I think, no one thought was going to happen, but clearly shutting the borders, keeping everyone in Australia has had a significant impact. And look, I think we should also acknowledge the government, federal and state governments, for the role they've done, and especially in allowing racing to keep going. And I should also mention the racing authorities that have done a good job to as best they can. We haven't been hasn't been interrupted too much, and that's allowed, I think, greater focus on people to have a look at racing. Those people, at some stage there, we were almost the only game in town that was going. So I think that has, it's certainly helped build that momentum that sort of seen more people want to invest or get into ownership.
And international participation in racing, obviously, like they bring a fair few over for the spring every year. It's going to be quite different moving ahead this year. Do you think because those restrictions here in Victoria, especially where I am, is going to affect international interest in Australian racing, because there's probably going to be less runners in, say, the Caulfield Cup, international runners in, say, the Caulfield Cup or the Melbourne Cup?
Oh, look, definitely. I think to a lot of people overseas, and I think there's a sense that people are really trying to get their head around the new rules that Racing Victoria announced a few weeks ago, and to see how that will impact upon participation. I think probably a few owners will want to move their horses to Australia earlier, so they have a sort of full prep, probably with an Australian trainer. I think there's talk of, flight being put on for some of those international horses coming out, sort of in the middle of the year, so giving them a longer time to adapt. It will be different, there's no doubt. I mean, obviously the most important thing is, the Melbourne Cup it's been a fantastic race for Australian racing. It's done a huge amount, not just for Melbourne, but I think for racing, that the standing of racing across the country. It's the race that generates a huge amount of interest, huge amount of traffic and eyeballs. So it's really important that we maintain or ensure really the health of the horses in that race. We can't afford the whole image of racing, not just the Melbourne Cup, but for everyone around the country, for there to be another fatality in the race. So it will be different this year. But it will. I guess we'll find out nearer the time in terms of how that affects how many people want to come out.
The prize money increases, there's been quite a few within the last 12 months, particularly in South Australia. And I think credit where it's due to racing, a really good job in trying to drive racing again in South Australia and get it back to what it once was. It used to be probably second or third to Victoria back in the day, or New South Wales. Yeah,
look, South Australia certainly. I think there's been a change in momentum. I think there's some there and some energy in the industry and wanting to improve it. And I think that's as you say, it sort of it lost its sort of position a little bit in terms of national standing. I think there's a real effort to get that back. And I was down in South Australia in March, and speaking to the trainers down there, speaking to owners down there, they felt that they were definitely pointing in the right direction now, which is great, because really for the industry to thrive nationally, it's great that we've got sort of almost like the sort of two powerhouses in New South Wales and Victoria. But it's really important that the other states, try and sort of tag along and try and not lose too much ground to those two sort of juggernauts. And South Australia, now Queensland, again, trying to do that. Looking at card at the BRC this coming Saturday. There's $1 million race on for 2-year-olds, the size. I know they have an ambition to turn that into a Group 1 race, and strong field for that. So again, BRC chief executive there doing a great job and really wanting to take racing in Brisbane to the next level.
Do you think the prize money here in Australia is a reason why people from overseas should breed horses here or race horses here in Australia, to bring them over from overseas?
Yeah, we're here in that vast amount of funding to the industry comes from prize money. So we've got a turnover deal, so that we're sort of guaranteed on every dollar that's bet on races, and that's not something that happens in every other country. Take for example the United Kingdom. The prize money there, they're essentially racing for the same level of prize money that they were 20 years ago. Whereas in Australia, prize money's basically doubled in a decade. So to give your listeners a comparison. So last year, 2020, obviously impacted by COVID. In Australia, there were 50 races worth $1 million Australian dollars or more. In America, I think there were 29. And in the whole Europe, so UK, Ireland, mainland Europe, there are only 7. So that's really starkly illustrates the difference. The differences there. Great prize money in places like Japan and Hong Kong as well, but it's impossible. Certainly, it's impossible in Hong Kong if you're not from an owner there, and even if you are based there, very tricky. And Japan, it's very tricky for international people to become an owner. So in terms of places where you can, pick up the phone a trainer, get an agent, look at a horse at a yearling sale, Australia is really out in front.
That's one particular issue, unfortunately, in the UK, the lack of prize money. I interviewed Johnny McKeever, the bloodstock agent, a number of weeks ago now, and Johnny was telling me he is really disappointed that of a Saturday, their prize money over there is how much we get, like a midweek meeting in the country. And like you have Royal Ascot and all those those as being premier racing, the best racing in the world, but it doesn't match up with the prize money at all.
Yeah, and it's been a challenge in the UK for look, as long as I can remember. My accent, that's where I come from originally, and it's always been the power probably resides with the bookmakers. So the way that works there is that they pay a percentage of profit, significant amount of money for media rights. But really, that hasn't generated the returns that probably a turnover model would have done for the industry there. So it's a shame, and it's an issue that I think really needs to be addressed, because the UK, you said it yourself, Ben, the UK does have an incredible standard of racing, but a lot of that is based upon a handful or more very significant owners who do it because they're passionate about it, who do it, who are perhaps less. We've got very different ownership groups in Australia to let's say the UK. Yeah. Australia is very egalitarian, so we've got more than 100,000 individuals who own a piece of a horse, which is incredible. Whereas in the UK, there's about 20,000 owners, so a fifth of the owners. The population in the UK is whatever it is, almost 3 times bigger. So UK is very much dependent upon some of those very big owners and their continued involvement that sort of props up the industry. And I think there's probably question marks as some of those people are getting on. That how you transition from those sort of those handful of very significant owners and try and build that base out a little bit.
Egalitarian approach here, I think, is a big reason why we do attract young people. We've got to try keep working and attracting more young people to the industry, because like over there in the UK and other parts of Europe, it's sort of viewed as like a rich man's game. Whereas here, you can walk into any race course, and on one side of you can have a millionaire from wherever, and on the other side of you can have a farmer from country Queensland who might own half a hoof and horse. That's what I love. You meet so many different people, and for a lot of people, they love the races not because of the money. The money isn't a problem for them, or they don't view it as a rich person's sport.
Yeah, look, Aushorse done quite a bit of research into what motivates people to become owners, and really, the idea of making a profit is never one of the top 2 or 3 reasons. It's sort of 4th or 5th. People do it because they love racing. They want to be involved. They want that excitement of being on the track, of that sense. Racing's got ownership is you can support football into the shed. You don't get to go in the sheds. Whereas if you're an owner, you get to have that experience. You get to have that access to your horse, to your trainer. It's a really it's a very unique thing. And you're right, in Australia, especially the way that whether syndication or trainers do a good job in terms of buying a horse. And then chopping it up into smaller pieces so that you can buy 5% or 10% or 2.5%, or a group of friends can buy 5%. And the experience is pretty much the same as often better than owning it all yourself. So we're very lucky in that respect. And I think trainers and syndicators do a pretty good job at engaging owners, taking them on that journey.
And just going to go down a bit of a different route here, Tom. Away from racing and breeding, what does Tom Reilly like to do in his spare time?
Oh, well, I've got 3 children who are 6, 4 and 2. So that keeps me pretty busy when I'm not working.
Prior to working at Aushorse, you worked in the print media, didn't you? You were a journalist at the Sydney Morning Herald.
Yeah. I was a journalist for a number of UK. Also, what was Fairfax, so both in Melbourne and in Sydney. So I was last job before taking this. I was an editor at the Sydney Morning Herald, so in charge of putting out a daily newspaper there.
And having worked in media, do you kind of see how racing traditionally struggles to get a percentage of the pie outside of the Spring Carnival? Because I think that's another thing that with social media and that now, it therefore means that race go down that route in order to get itself noticed and marketed outside of Spring Carnival time, for example. You know what I mean?
Yeah, look, I think the media landscape has changed immensely in the last last 15 years. It's been huge. When I started at the age, I was never a racing, obviously followed racing closely, so I knew the guys that worked there, and it was probably 4 or 5 people working on racing at the age, and now obviously Devon Cliff's there, but newsrooms have changed, the resourcing they can give things has changed. We as an industry need to be really good about how we are making sure we don't lose in that. We don't lose out in that changing environment. Digital media gives you an amazing opportunity to actually get stories out there and get information out there. Are we doing that as effectively as possible? I think our challenges in racing and breeding is that we have that very that different state and territories, and could we to let's say how we portray the industry. I think if we were able to do that, we'd probably get, we could resource that better and get even better cut through than we're doing at the moment. If you look at done, they have sought to, let's say in the end, they've got NRL.com, which is, a national sort of platform that allows fans to access and really drive engagement. I should note that racing.com, I think there's a good job in Victoria doing that, but if you want to go and look at the form, you can't go and look at the form anywhere and see. If you've got runners coming from different states, there's no one site you can go to in terms of the industry-owned assets. I'm talking about when you see the replays from, let's say, New South Wales and Victoria and Queensland all together that you don't have to pay for. So that to me is an area where you go, if there was better cooperation, could we sort of really target a more national approach to how our industry is perceived.
All right, Tom, thanks very much for joining me today and explaining what Aushorse is all about and what we need to do to market racing to a more younger audience as well. Appreciate it.
Well, thanks very much.